Like being an assembly, except sort of friendlier. I'm Jo. I run the Every Child Matters campaign, and I'm sort of trying to unite as many campaigns as I possibly can. I also run the ND Send Specialists Limited, and I'm online, hence logos. But I am absolutely honoured to be here today. I'm speaking as a parent, a former teacher of 17 years, an independent SEND consultant and advocate, and a late diagnosed neurodivergent adult. So we've had a lot about the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill today, and we know that it's being framed as reform. Sadly, as many people have said, reform it is not. What it is a consolidation of power, a narrowing of possibility, and perhaps unsurprisingly, a continuation of a system that has failed to follow its own laws. Now, something that is very often avoided in these conversations, something that I'm sure that many of you will be painfully aware of already, is that the SEND crisis does not exist because legislation is inadequate. The SEND crisis exists because legislation has not been followed. Across England, as I'm sure you know, local authorities routinely fail to secure provision written into EHCPs, delay assessments well beyond statutory timescales, replace needs-led decisions with resource-led ones, and these practices have been repeatedly found unlawful by tribunal, ombudsman and the courts. And yet, no one is held accountable. So when I hear that the solution is more reform, more control, more centralisation, I have to ask, reform of what? The law or the people breaking it? And whilst we're talking about reform, and just very quickly, these concerns are compounded by what we are now seeing emerge from the government's SEND white paper, which felt like a PR stunt box-ticking exercise, if I'm honest. And I think I'm not going to go into as much detail as I had planned, but a white paper that ignores systemic unlawfulness, sidesteps evidence from the Neurodivergence Task and Finish group, and increases burdens on already struggling schools will entrench failure, not fix it. So what does this bill mean for schools? Well, the bill proposes to remove autonomy from schools that are still managing to respond flexibly to children's needs, centralise curriculum control, and force academies towards a single educational model. One size has never fitted all children. And it certainly does not fit neurodivergent children. 20% of the population, and that is a very conservative estimate, is neurodivergent. That's not a flaw. That's not overdiagnosis. That is human variation. Yet our education system continues to define success by conformity to neurotypical norms, narrow attainment measures, and behaviourist control. As a former teacher of 17 years, I've seen what this does to staff. Teachers are micromanaged, they're surveyed, they are stripped of professional judgment. They are forced to deliver content that they know is inappropriate or inaccessible. They are punished for deviating, even when deviation is in the child's best interests. Here's a fact policymakers rarely hear. It takes, on average, 2 years in an appropriate, suitable specialist setting to undo the damage that mainstream education does to children who do not fit the system. That damage is not inevitable. It is designed in. And that's where my family experience comes in, because I'm also here as a parent. My son is 7 years old. He is autistic ADHD. He waited 3 years for that diagnosis, and he has had an EHCP since 2023. He has a PDA profile that remains undiagnosed because some local authorities still refuse to acknowledge that it exists. And he has been failed by 2 mainstream primary schools. He's been discharged from CAMS 3 times without ever being seen. Early help has repeatedly refused support. We're told that we already have the strategies. What we don't have is a system that works. My son is currently at home, unable to attend school. Not because we don't value education, not because we opted out, but because attending school caused such significant distress that it became a matter of mental health and safety. And increasingly, this is the reality for many families. And this is where the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill becomes actively dangerous. Families like mine do not withdraw children lightly. We withdraw when the system has exhausted the child, attendance has become trauma, and compliance has been prioritised over well-being. Yet this bill treats withdrawal as suspicion. It reframes safeguarding as surveillance, and it places families who have made impossible decisions under increased scrutiny, threat and pressure. Attendance is not the problem you think it is. Punitive attendance measures, fines, exclusions and threats do not improve well-being. They compound trauma. For children like my son, the risk from this bill is clear. Increased pressure to return to unsuitable settings, reduced trust between families and professionals, an escalation of mental health harm, all in the name of well-being. That is not well-being. That is institutional self-protection. If this bill passes in its current form, it will not support families like mine. It will make us less safe, it will make honesty riskier, and it will deter parents from acting in their child's best interests. No child should be forced back into an environment that has already broken them. You'll note I said that if this bill passes, it will make honesty riskier. There is one more thing that I need to say, because it speaks directly to how the current system responds when people tell the truth. In April 2025, in my role as a family advocate, I was served with a cease and desist. Not for acting unlawfully, not for misinformation, but for speaking openly about systemic failure, unlawful practice, and the harm being caused to children and families, and for requesting information that families had a legal right to know. That letter was intended to silence me. Instead, it clarified something important. Just how threatening telling the truth has become to systems that rely on compliance and quiet suffering. That experience led me to reach out to Mike Charles. I then appeared on his podcast, where these issues were discussed openly and without fear, and where I met Jen Hodge, who was talking earlier and I now can't see. Since then, I've been lucky enough to become part of this ever-increasing network of incredible individuals, including many of you here today, all of whom are equally committed to children's rights, lawful practice, and genuine reform. People who refuse to be intimidated. And that matters, because this is not about one family, one child, or one voice. It is about patterns, it is about systems, and it is about a growing number of people who are no longer willing to be silenced while children are harmed. To close, SEND reform cannot succeed in isolation. SEND difficulties are amplified by an education system built on standardisation, behaviourist models, and narrow definitions of success. Instead of addressing that system, we reframe SEND itself as the problem. We ignore alternative pathways. We ignore vocational, technical, skills-based routes. We ignore play-based learning, alternative communication, different developmental trajectories, and call it inclusion. This crisis was not created by children. It was not created by parents. And it was not created by teachers. It was created by austerity, ideology, and a refusal to listen, even when the law requires you to. If reform is to mean anything at all, it must start with accountability, lawful practice, genuine co-production, and an education system that values and champions difference instead of punishing it. I and many others are ready to help, but only if reform is about children's rights and well-being, not about control. Because every child matters, not just the compliant ones. And a system that responds to distress with control, to trauma with punishment, is not protecting children. it is protecting itself. Thank you.